Welcome to this post-landing news conference for Space Shuttle Discovery's STS-133 mission to the International Space Station. Joining us here at the Kennedy Space Center, we have three managers who will give us the latest on Discovery's 13-day flight and its final mission following this morning's landing here in Florida. First, we have NASA's Associate Administrator for Space Operations, Bill Gerstenmaier.
Good afternoon.
To his left is the Space Shuttle Launch Integration Manager, Mike Moses.
Good afternoon.
And finally, we have the Shuttle Launch Director, Mike Leinbach.
Good afternoon.
We'll start with comments and then open it up to questions. Mr. Gerstenmaier?
Thanks, Howard. I don't really know what to say today, except I really want to thank the Discovery team for doing just an amazing job with this flight and this vehicle. When I think of the Discovery team, I think not only of the folks that did all the processing that made this last flight just as perfect as it could be, but all the folks that throughout the history of the vehicle have participated and made this vehicle what it is. When I think back to the Downey and Palmdale guys and the folks we've worked with throughout the years, they're all part of the big Discovery team that pulled all this off and gave us just a phenomenal flight, a phenomenal way to see the end of the Discovery vehicle. But again, I think its legacy will be the future. If you take a look at what this crew did, the extra 2 days on orbit, they really got Space Station in a great configuration. They did a ton of extra work on board Space Station, and that was really only possible because the vehicle did such a great job on orbit. There was really no anomalies on the vehicle. It came down to the ground exactly the same way, looked extremely clean underneath. But that extra work and to get Station really prepared is really going to set us well up for this next research period, because there would have been a lot of work being left for the Station crew to go work through with the HTV arriving and the ATV arriving, and then also Discovery leaving the PMM. So they just did a phenomenal job. We're going to see here in a couple days roll back out to the pad, and we've got 2 more flights. We need to keep the focus on those flights and stay diligent and keep working those flights just as hard as we did this flight. Space flight doesn't come easy, as we all know. I think last week we got a chance to see that with the Taurus XL and the Glory mission, that things that are even fairly simple to us and we think we fully understood, we obviously didn't understand, and we lost a Glory spacecraft last week. So that reemphasizes to me we follow the same processes. The systems are different, but the same processes, the same thought process is used in all our shuttle flights as well. So we just need to stay focused, keep our head down, recognize that this is not easy, keep the teams moving forward. And I can tell you, I'm sure that the folks here at Kennedy that work on the vehicles know that, and they will do a great job of getting these vehicles ready to go fly, and we'll close out the shuttle program the way it deserves to be closed out, on an extremely high note. But again, I can't thank the Discovery team enough for what they've done. They just did a phenomenal job today. The vehicle was just awesome. So, Mike?
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, I'll echo that and say that it was really a triumph today for the whole entire Discovery team. The vehicle was in fantastic shape. It flew the whole mission in really great condition. The thermal protection system looks fantastic, and it was beautiful. We talked a little bit about the weather. The winds were blowing crosswind for a little bit, and they turned around as expected and pretty much headed straight down the runway. I think we ended up with like a 1-knot crosswind at actual touchdown. A nice little stiff headwind, but nothing outside of limits at all. And it made for a nice cooling breeze out there on the runway after the crew got out. But again, no issues at all. We got to see on the thermal protection system, one of the things that was interesting to see is the little protuberance tile that we fly, a little bump that we put out on the edge of the wing to intentionally trip the boundary layer and learn about this hypersonic high-speed reentry zone that really the shuttle is one of the few vehicles that flies in a way that we can truly gather data on it. So in addition to all the great science and research going on in station, the vehicle itself is a science platform. And even here at the end of the program, we're still progressing. This was the first flight of the half-inch protuberance. The teams got really good data. We think the thermocouple data will be great. And then we also have a team of folks both on the ground and in the air doing what we call our high-therm imagery. The Casglance P3 aircraft was down near Guatemala, Honduras, and captured Mach 18 photos. And they believe they can see the cone where this boundary layer was asymmetric and tripped early at Mach 18. And then we had ground-based units over near St. Petersburg in Florida, and they captured lower speed data around Mach 6, and again, really good imagery, and that's going to really advance our knowledge of high-speed entry aerodynamics. We're going to continue that with Endeavour. It's also flying a half-inch protuberance, although we were joking that this data looked good. Maybe we'll go and run out there and make it even bigger. But no, I don't think we're going to do that, but we'll talk about it. But anyway, it shows some of the great stuff that we can do with the shuttle. The thing that leaves me, the legacy Discovery's leaving behind is the pictures from Fly Around, and you look at the size of the space station, and you look at the pictures from when the crew was inside, and you look at the volume and the amount of hardware that was carried into space by the shuttle and the international partners and our Russian colleagues. But if you think about that, all that hardware, most of it on the U.S. segment came through Florida, was processed and carried up on a shuttle and put together and assembled, and it, without very many exceptions, worked perfectly and got assembled. There were no big instances where we ran an umbilical cable and came up 3 feet short. All that worked perfect, and it's a true testament not only to the shuttle teams here in Florida, but the station teams building their hardware, the agency as a whole, and the country that's behind us in manned spaceflight. So I'll end with just a fantastic mission, a really fantastic vehicle, and a great way for Discovery to end its career.
Okay. Well, see, I don't have a lot to add. The vehicle looks really good, as we typically have been saying in the last several missions. Very few dings on the tile. The thing I'm going to take away from today was the attitude of the ground processing team with the vehicle out there. As soon as wheels stopped and the convoy made its way up to the vehicle, and then the ground crews made their way up to do the initial safing, the purge, and the cooling unit attachment, and the assessment of the vehicle, they did that today like they did it the last mission of Discovery, 10 missions of Discovery ago, 20 missions of Discovery ago. They did not skip a beat today. It's a true testament to the people who work on this ship and that love what they do. Again, they treated this one as if we're going to fly another dozen times with Discovery. So it was just really, really heartwarming to me to see that amount of care and professionalism with the ground team today. Listening to the loops during entry was always fun, but my takeaway is going to be the ground crew and how they hit that machine today with all the vigor and dedication that they've had for many, many years. So we'll get her back in the OPF in another couple hours or so and begin the real safing of the vehicle in the OPF, and then we'll get into the transition or retirement phase of her life. Meanwhile, Endeavour, we were going to try to take Endeavour out tonight. We talked long and hard this morning about the weather forecast for tonight, and had we made an attempt, likely we would have violated our lightning criteria. It's no more than 10% within 20 nautical miles during the entire rollout. And Kathy Winters, launch weather officer, gave us a forecast that would have violated that. So rather than mess around with that during the day today and have crews come in and wonder if we were going to roll out, we decided early this morning to go ahead and knock that off. And we'll come in tomorrow morning, take another look at the weather for tomorrow night's roll. It would be the same time, a 4 o'clock call to stations and a 2000 8 o'clock p.m. local time first motion. We'll take a look at that tomorrow morning and assess whether we think we have a shot at that or whether we may have to slide another day. We'll cross that bridge tomorrow morning. But we'll get Endeavour out to the pad and get on with her pad processing for her final flight too. So a good day. Discovery's home safe. The astronauts are down. I was looking in their eyes as they were looking back at the ship, and they had some special feelings, I'm sure, as well. So you'll get a chance to talk to them later. Good day here, and Discovery's home safe.
Okay, we'll open it up to questions now. Please wait for the microphone. Then gets you say your name, news affiliation, and whom you'd like to have your question answered. And we'll start with Perth.
Hi, Mark Kirkman, Interspace News. Just a quick one, probably for Mr. Gerstenmaier. You're talking about pressing ahead as targeted for Endeavour, but is there still a serious discussion about pushing Atlantis back into September-ish?
And again, I think we'll kind of look at the overall manifest. If there's no technical problems and no issues, we'd still like to launch, I think, the end of June, and that's kind of the way we're heading as we look forward. If something on the station side becomes compelling, that there is a real hard requirement that we move, or we discover some technical problem in processing, we'll obviously move to where we need to move. But right now, things look like they're falling in place, that there's no particularly unique drivers, and we're probably aiming for around the end of June, just as we've been planning all along.
I'll start to stay on this side. How about Marcia?
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press, for either Bill or Mike Leinbach. What's the earliest you could envision handing over Discovery's keys to the Smithsonian?
Go ahead.
I don't know. We're going to do the down processing that we normally do to safe all the systems. Then we've also asked to maybe take some other components and take a more in-depth look at them. There's some, in the spirit of what Mike described with the boundary layer transitioning thing, we can still learn a lot from these vehicles. There's some hydraulic systems, some other things that we haven't really had a chance to take a look at because it was really too invasive to get in there and take a look at. So we're going to request that the teams help us pull a couple of those components out to do some real detailed forensics on, so we can then learn about for the next generation of vehicles. So we're going to take really the best of what we got here, learn as much as we can from this, archive it, so then when we go build a next generation, we'll actually have really learned everything we can from these vehicles. But I don't have the exact timeline of when it all flows out and where things flow.
Well, and part of it has to do with the down processing and transition retirement of the other two vehicles too. It's an integrated plan between the three vehicles, and we'll have somewhat of a limited workforce, to do all that work, and so it really depends on the overall integrated schedule. It's not as quick as you might think. It's many months away till we'll be ready to hand it over.
Possibly by the end of the year, maybe not until 2012.
I think it was the fall sometime.
Yeah, it was the fall.
templates,
It was this fall.
The fall of this year.
Mm-hmm.
Fall of 2011.
Fall
Is that what you're saying?
2011.
Okay, thank you.
No? And then we'll go to Ari.
Bill Harwood, CBS. Two quick ones for me. One for Mike, either Mike. What is the forecast for tomorrow night as of today? And the other question, it may be a Gerst question, I'm not sure. Shannon was talking to us back before it was going to go in October, or November, I guess, about just what you were talking about, taking parts off of Discovery and using it as a learning tool. Is that whole program that he wants to do still intact, or have you cut that in any way, or is Discovery the one that's really going to be used for the forensics primarily versus the other guys?
Let's see, the weather for tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, the weather is going to get better. The worst weather around here at the Kennedy Space Center will be during the day tomorrow. And that would cause us fits in getting the preparations done for rollout beginning at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. And so we'll look in the morning to see if that front is sped up at all. If it's sped up and we have a decent shot at getting out tomorrow night, we'll press on. But the thing I worry about tomorrow evening is really not the roll time frame itself, but getting all the work done prior to that to be ready to roll. Because there's a lot of outdoor work we have to do outside the VAB and at the pad to get ready for the vehicle.
And then, Bill, on your second question, yeah, that forensic plan is still intact and in place. We're basically going to take a look at it for each vehicle as we go. Some of that plan evolves not so much forensics as it is hardware that we'd want to carry to the next vehicle as that next evolution of designs come forward. A lot of the main propulsion system elements now are items we'd want to take a look at, given that we're going to potentially design a propulsion system that's a little more similar to our heritage hardware. And so that list is constantly evolving, but the intact plan is still, there'll be some forensic stuff taken off, there'll be some equipment taken off to save for the future. So yeah, we're doing that basically vehicle by vehicle.
Yeah, and I think we would use all the vehicles because we want to get the sample size as large as we can to make sure that there's not something unique in one application that wasn't in another one.
Yeah, Ari.
Irene Klotz with Reuters. For Bill Gerstenmaier, has there been any changes in these continuing resolution budgets that you keep getting that will allow you to start work on any new programs or end work on the Constellation program?
I mean, I think you can see some of the legislation that's been put out there, the Senate version and the House version. You can take a look at those, and I think the intent there is to provide some clarity for us to allow us to move forward. But you need to look at them and look at the details of what are in the proposals that are sitting out there.
Have you been able to change any of your kind of moving forward plans based on what you're reading in the legislation?
Well, the problem is that the legislation has to get approved. So, we can look at it and say that this is, this could be advantageous to us or allow us to move forward. This may not. But then it really has to go to the debate between the House and Senate, and then eventually we need to get the final legislation that comes to us, and then we'll go implement. So, we kind of look at it almost much like you do, I think, is we can see what we can anticipate various scenarios, different ways things can go. We look at those, we plan, we get ready to go move forward, but then we wait until the actual legislation gets done before we actually go then put in place firm plans.
Okay, how about Todd? We're back.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today. I've got two questions. One for Mike Leinbach. I was wondering if you could kind of give us an idea of how much contingency time you have in the schedule for the STS-134 pad flow, And for either Mike or Bill, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on Discovery coming home so clean, and I was wondering if you had a number on how many IFAs you took in this flight, and what your feelings are about retiring a vehicle that seems to have so much more life in it.
Well, let's see. The pad contingency, we had 8 days at the pad going into this flow once the tanking test was removed by the program from this flow. So we've used up one of those days. Maybe use up another if we don't get out. We will use up another if we don't get out tomorrow night. So we'd be down to 6 or 7, something like that. Very, very, very easy flow for us. You'll see us probably back on schedule by the end of next week. If we get into hyperload by the end of next week as per plan, then we'll be right back on schedule.
And then on the question, so the IFAs, we don't actually officially baseline those until about a week after we've landed. So that final count's still coming. But based on the funnies and the anomalies we took in flight, I think it was in the 8 or 9 range, very small number. I don't even know if we hit double digits. I would call it a record low, but I would say that I knew exactly. So it's very close, I would say, to a record low. Certainly very, very low. I kind of look at it from the other side. To me, that's a testament of, even though we are shutting down the program and everybody knew going into this processing flow that this was Discovery's last flight, nobody cut corners, nobody skipped steps, nobody did anything that was different than they would have done, like Mike said, as if it was 10 flights ago. So rather than look at it as a perfect vehicle that's ready to be put away, I look at it, that was a perfect vehicle that's ready to be put away, and that means we did our job the right way. It's always hard to say that, yeah, you could go turn that right around and fly it again. We just don't have an external tank to hang it on, so that kind of takes that decision out of our hands. But no, Discovery was in great shape, and I view that more as a testament to the team down here. And even the flight directors from Houston who were here today comment on that too, that it's always it's a real thrill when the mission's able to execute because the vehicle doesn't get in the way. That's the perfect mission, and that's what KSC does, and they do very, very well.
And I would just add to exactly the same kind of thoughts. It's really a testimony to how focused and how diligent the teams are processing this vehicle that it came back exactly the way it did. And it's exactly what I expected them to do, and it's exactly the way I want the vehicles to come back. We talk about finishing strong, and that's exactly what we wanted to do, and Discovery did it well. And the team should be very, very proud of what they have done. They have done things that are not easy, and they made it look easy, and that's exactly what they should be doing.
Peter?
Peter King with CBS News Radio. And this is a follow-up on something Marcia asked. And either I've been in a cave or under a rock or something, but I've seen a lot of reports that say Discovery is going to the Smithsonian. I haven't seen anything official that says Discovery is going to the Smithsonian. So can you clear that up? Did I miss it? Was I on another planet?
I think in Charlie's testimony, he said they were going to make an announcement on the orbiters, I think April 12th in his testimony, and that's when the official announcements will be made.
And just to follow on, because I'm wondering, figuring that if it's going up there, it flies back on, flies up on the 747, but you don't necessarily have the infrastructure up there to deal with getting it off there and getting it to a museum. I mean, will it basically be taken on a flatbed and taken on a slow convoy? Is that how you plan to do that?
Yeah, so the basic plan is whatever site we're going to, we would fly it in on the carrier aircraft, the 747, and then we have a plan in place that would use multiple cranes to lift the vehicle off of the back of the 747 and then take it to the display site. I believe transportation to the display site is one of the criteria that's being used in the selection of those sites. So from that point on, until a site's selected, we're not going to do any more planning as to how you'd get a vehicle to a particular location. At the Smithsonian, they're right at the end, at the Udvar-Hazy Museum, right at the end of a very giant runway, so that makes it pretty simple. No truck needed there, I don't think.
Okay.
Tom Johnson with Fox 35 News in Orlando. I was wondering if we could get your thoughts on seeing this ship that has such an amazing history in this program, seeing it come in for its final landing and the end of its spaceflight career.
Well, let's see. I'll go first. I stood back and looked at Discovery today for quite some time and just watched the people work on her. Walking around and listening to the comments that the people were making, pretty much all heard that what a great ship this is. Can't believe the program's coming to an end yet. But intellectually, we all know it is, and so it's kind of a delicate balance emotionally to deal with that. But again, like I said earlier, the people working on this machine, they didn't skip a beat today. There were no big emotional outbursts and tears and all that kind of stuff. That the people had a job to do, and by God, they were going to do the job the best they could the last time on Discovery, and that's the way it'll be on Endeavour and Atlantis too. So the time for reflection, I think, comes later. I didn't know if it would come today for me or not. I don't think it has yet. I think it'll come later.
Anybody else? Are we good?
Mike said it well.
Okay, Ken Kramer for Spaceflight Magazine. For Bill Gerstenmaier, please, 2 questions. One is about the fly-around. You weren't able to do that at the station. I wonder if you might consider doing that with the next shuttle mission there, and if the ATV would still be there.
I think the program's going to take a look at that. There's some discussions to see if that's the right thing to go do. Again, I think I would again applaud the Russians for their decisions and their logics of with this new vehicle, and it had some unique problems in the display systems on board that they really wanted to understand, and they told us that they didn't think this was an appropriate time to go fly around. That was a very good thing for them to go do. It's the same kind of behavior we really want from our own folks. If there's something that doesn't look right, it isn't exactly the right thing to do, we want to know. And they did that, and that was excellent. So now we'll go back as a team and we'll go look at it. It was nice before because the HTV protected the windows of the orbiter, made some things a little bit easier from a contamination standpoint. So we'll have to go take a look and make sure that we don't have some contamination issues with the orbiter and methodically work through all those issues. But I think the programs will go take a look at it and see if this is something that makes sense with a vehicle that is essentially been, the Soyuz will be a different version of the Soyuz. It'll be the older style, so that issue will be behind us. But then we need to make sure all the other things are right and it makes sense for us. And we'll also look at the engineering benefit. Are we going to get enough benefit from this fly around that it really warrants us taking some risk? Because every time you undock and have to redock, there's some risk associated with that. So we'll spend some time looking over the next couple of weeks and then make a decision, probably around the flight readiness review for STS-134.
The other thing I wanted to ask is about how you went about approving the 135 mission. At a previous briefing, you said it was going to be kind of like a joint decision between you and the White House and the Congress. And I wonder if you could describe how this decision to fly the flight came about, please. Thank you.
Again, I think the compelling reason for the flight really is that it really helps us set up Space Station in the proper configuration to allow the commercial cargo providers some time to come online. You know, we've talked about it before. Without STS-135, we need the commercial cargo providers to start delivering cargo fairly routinely at the first part of 2012. With the flight, that delays that criticality of those commercial partners coming online till probably the end of 2012. So that gives us about a year's margin of allowing them as a new industry to come online and start delivering in a regular fashion to Space Station. If they don't come online and we didn't have Discovery, then we'd be in a posture where we have to reduce research on station, which we clearly don't want to do. If that wasn't satisfactory, then we'd have to potentially reduce the crew size from 6 to 3, which would not be satisfactory. So we laid out the pretty sound logic of how this flight really benefits the station in a huge way. It also gives some relief to the commercial providers, because I think that's a good thing. You know, they're doing well, they're moving forward in a good direction, but we all know how tough it is in those final weeks before flight and weather and other launch windows and everything we deal with. They're going to deal with exactly the same things. So to have some extra margin in there really makes sense from an overall program standpoint. So that's the basic rationale we laid out. With that, we're okay to go do the flight. We still have got to watch the budget stuff, depending how all that sorts out. If we get some large budget cut, we may have to do something with STS-135. But right now, pending we don't get some big budget cut, we're in the process of ready to go move forward.
So did you basically make that decision then, without that much input from the White House?
I laid out the logic for the decision, and then I looked for comments from all the folks we mentioned previously about that decision.
Jim Siegel, Celebration Independent Newspaper. 2 questions for Bill Gerstenmaier. First of all, in your opening remarks, you mentioned how important the extra couple of days were in getting some tasks finished. Wondered if you could be specific about what are some of those tasks that were accomplished.
Well, one thing that was pretty important to us was the permanent multi-purpose module. It came with a lot of structure in it that held racks in place and held components in place so they could survive the acid environment. We then needed to remove a lot of that material, kind of packing material in a sense, but it's much more than packing material. Had to remove that, and then we wanted to stow that in the HTV so it could be disposed of. It would just take up space on board station. So this allowed, essentially, the extra shuttle crew allowed the PMM to get configured for operations on orbit. So when it left, the PMM came with, you know, kind of like when you get a box in the mail, right, and some assembly required, right? It's the same kind of thing with the PMM. It came with some configuration required before you could actually start using it. The shuttle crew was able to help with that activity. We also had this oxygen generation system on station. We wanted to put a new filter and system in to buffer the fluid that runs through the oxygen generation system. The shuttle crew was able to assist in that activity. Then, if you remember, during the flight, the carbon dioxide system on the Cedra removal system, it had a heater failure. They had to go in and essentially cut the wires to that individual heater element on both the primary and secondary string, and that was a big activity, and the crew was able to assist in that. So what was really neat was, here's the shuttle team that is prepared to do these tasks, but then they can actually just fall right in with the station team, and then they can work as a totally combined team and actually accomplish all this reconfiguration I just talked about. So what essentially they did is, as they left the space station in really ready for research configuration, which we would not have been in if they would have left earlier. And that's a big step to us, because that allows us to start turning up the gain on research and how much we can do on station in the next couple weeks, which we would not have been able to do without their extra help. So it was tremendously important of what they did.
And then one other question. I believe it was at the pre-launch news conference a few weeks ago that you had a question about, or someone asked you a question about the reports that a commercial company was interested in buying one or more of the shuttle vehicles, and you made a comment, negotiations were underway or something. That's all you could say. Is there anything more you can report on that at this point?
Not really. The same negotiations are still underway, and it's part of the contract process. We can't talk about it until the contracts get awarded.
Do you have any idea when that might be announced, if it's going to be announced? Are we talking a day, a week, a month, a year?
Probably a month.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Hi. Eben Brown, Fox News Radio. First question for either of the mics. What's going to be different with the down processing now? What won't you do? What do you have to do differently? You going to rip? What guts are you going to rip out specifically? Is there anything you really, really want to look at that you haven't had a chance to before until this point in time?
Well, see, the initial phase of the down mission processing is about the same, and we have to get the cryogenics out of the fuel cell system. There's some hypergalls we need to drain. Those types of things. The old pyrotechnic cartridges need to be removed. Those types of things are very standard. That's a couple of weeks. I don't know that we have a real detailed plan on what we want to get to first from a forensics standpoint. Maybe do you, Mike?
Yeah, well, we've seen the list as far as prioritizing it. We haven't really done that yet, but there's the down processing Mike talked about, and then there's safing it to be for public, and that's taking all the hazardous plumbing out. And we talked about, do you try to decontaminate all the lines, or do you just remove them? In some instances, we're just going to remove some plumbing. So the hydraulic systems, the ammonia systems, the nitrogen tetroxide and monomethylhydrazine and hydrazine systems, those will all be coming out of the vehicle or deconditioned or decontaminated. And then some of the hardware that we want to go take a look at, some of the actuators in the hydraulic systems on basically the flight control systems, the elevons, the rotor speed brake, and the body flap. Some of those actuators have been in line for a long time. We want to kind of tear them apart and see what condition they're in. The APUs we're looking at bringing out as a potential save hardware that could be plugged and played into the next vehicle and used as a hydraulic power system. Maybe not. So there's still some debate on the usefulness and what education we're going to get out of these pieces. And again, we're kind of taking that ship by ship as we go. And in fact, I think in a couple weeks we're going to see that final list come to my board, and we'll add that to the plan, and then Mike's team will go off and prioritize that and know when they want to take that hardware off the vehicle. So it's kind of a work in progress.
And for Mr. Gerstenmaier, what is, I get asked this question a lot, what's the funding situation for 135? Is the check been written? Is this really 100% paid for and let's go do it? Or is it still, we're going ahead and getting it ready, we're just waiting for the check to actually come?
Well, you know, where we are is in the government, right? We're under a continuing resolution, right, until April, is it April 18th? March 18th. March 18th, sorry. 14 days plus 4 is 18, so it's March 18th. And so then we need to get either some additional continuing resolution funds to move forward, or we may get an appropriation which would then fund us for the full year. And if we get the funding for the full year, we think included in that would be the funds associated with Fly and STS-135. If we get another extension, it could be 14 days, it could be 30 days. I don't know what that extension will be, and that'll fund us for this next period of time, and we'll move forward. So we just kind of wait until we get the funding. But we're not any different than the rest of the government, and I think the Congress and the administration would like to get us a budget, and I think they'll work together as soon as they can to get us a budget that the government can use. But that's the basic plan. So we're kind of incrementally funded throughout the year, kind of period to period as these deadlines come forward.
Denise Chow at space.com. A question for Mike Leinbach. With Discovery's history and the past performance of the vehicle, I think there were some pretty high expectations for this flight, and especially with it being Discovery's final flight. I'm wondering, with the way the mission played out, how did it line up with your expectations?
Well, it performed extraordinarily well on orbit. The launch was excellent. No issues going uphill. The on-orbit mission success speaks for itself. Well over 100% of the objectives accomplished. The landing today was outstanding. Talked to the commander. He had a little bit of winds to deal with on final, and he dealt with those perfectly fine, obviously. So it just played out the way we wanted it to. I mean, you know, Gers said it before. We wanted to go out on a high note, and Discovery has done that. And we couldn't ask for more. It was virtually a perfect mission. Conducted by a perfect flight crew and ground crew, and very proud of the people who put the ship together, and very proud of the flight controllers in Houston who execute the mission. And I couldn't be happier from a mission success perspective. I couldn't be happier.
Hi, Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com with a question for Mike Moses, I think. With regards to preparing Discovery and the subsequent orbiters for museum display, museums serve a purpose to share history with the public, but they also serve a purpose of maintaining engineering examples for future study, such as what NASA went back to take a look at the Apollo capsules as they were developing Orion. How much of that consideration plays into what systems you rip out of the orbiters or remove from the orbiters? And as you're removing it, are you looking, other than the systems that are hazardous to health, about eventually letting those systems be restored back into the vehicles? And lastly, how much of a user manual comes with the orbiters to the museums? Are you preparing some type of service history or you know, how to use a space shuttle guide for the curators? Thanks.
Let's see. All that is still kind of in the TBD phase because it all depends on the specific display site that is getting that order. So until that's decided, we haven't started negotiations as to what equipment they want. Do they want it in a historical preservation? Do they want engines installed or on the side? Do they want, you know, that's all ongoing negotiation once a display site is picked. And so I can't really answer the question because we haven't picked any sites yet. As far as the manuals and documentation, it's the same kind of thing. We have all the program documentation as a federal agency. That all has to be archived for federal records retention. So it's available for access. How much is going to be packaged up and shipped out with the orbiter is, again, TBD based on that display site. And it kind of comes down to the money, and that's where the shuttle program ended up. You know, we would have loved as a program to be able to still have a budget for 5 or 6 more years to go with a fine-tooth comb and open all these systems up and look and learn all these lessons. Take that hardware, preserve it, like, for example, in the propulsion systems, rather than just removing plumbing that's contaminated, decontaminated. But that's not a cheap thing to do. And just for display in a museum, that's not in our charter as NASA to provide that. So we have to go negotiate what that site needs and how we jointly be able to pay for that and afford it. So again, it sounds like we don't really have a plan. We have a whole lot of options that we just haven't been able to down select until we get a display site picked. So once that happens in a couple weeks or months or so, we'll be able to move forward on that and hopefully make that all a little clearer.
I just might add a little bit to that. And I'm going to preface this by admitting I'm very, very prejudiced by where I think an orbiter ought to go. But I have seen the concept for the display here at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Center, and if indeed we do get one here, it'll knock your socks off.
Subtle. Have any a few follow-up questions, Marcia?
Follow-up question for Bill Gerstenmaier. There's going to be an onslaught of attention for the next flight, not so much because it's Endeavor's last flight, but because of the commander and his marriage to Representative Giffords. I'm just wondering, do you see all that involving his personal situation as overshadowing what's going to be the flight itself? And is NASA prepared for all the hoopla that's going to surround that one?
Yeah, it's the next flight's a pretty special flight in itself. Also, if you know, the Alpha Magnetic Spectrometer is flying on that flight, right? And it's put together by, I think, 16 countries and 60 different principal investigators. Professor Ting is leading that effort. So that's a very special payload for Space Station. It's truly uniquely geared to Space Station. The data it collects is truly unique and pretty special. So I think that's a special piece of that mission, as well as the human interest side that you just described. And I think it's our job on the NASA side is to be prepared for all these contingencies, right, or to put plans in place to keep our focus on the primary mission, which is to really use these vehicles to outfit station in the most effective manner. Because as I described to you how critical STS-135 is, STS-134 is just as critical, and it brings this unique instrument to station. So we need to make sure that we've worked the process and we understand that we can allow folks to do what they need to go do and let the media have access where the media needs to have access, but yet provide an environment that allows our workers to stay focused, to continue to do what we need to go do. Because I stressed to you earlier, it appears easy what we've done. This is not easy. I can't express to you how proud I am of the Discovery team, because there was enough extra noise in this whole system. There's personal things they have to decide, but yet they were able to stay 100% focused on their job. And I think we'll do the same thing on the next two flights, and we'll do our part as a NASA management team to make sure that we've enabled our workforce to do what they do best as best they can.
Todd?
Yeah, Todd Halverson of Florida Today again for Gerst. You mentioned the loss of the Glory satellite earlier in your comments, and I was wondering how much commonality there is between the TARIS vehicle that launched that mission and the TARIS vehicle that will be flying the cargo resupply missions for you, and whether the back-to-back losses of TARIS vehicles gives you concern about that particular rocket's ability to come online in time to deliver cargo to the station.
They're very different rockets from a fundamental standpoint. One's basically a solid-based system. The other one is a liquid-based system. So they're very different from a basic vehicle standpoint. So that's one difference. We need to go look at the specifics of the fairing and understand the differences. I don't know the details yet, but I'm sure the teams will go look at those. That same fairing system is used on other rockets other than the Taurus. It's used on Minotaur and some other rockets. So we need to go look for commonality across all those and see what we can go learn. I think, again, it's too early to tell. We'll just take this kind of step by step, go through the process, one piece at a time, let the mission mishap integration board determine what the most proximate cause was or what the potential problem was, and then see how that applies. But it doesn't cast any doubt in my mind, on the future cargo providers that are coming online. But what it does is it serves to me as a caution to all of us that how difficult this business is. I was involved pretty heavily in the OCO loss, and we followed that and we reviewed that with the same diligence we do all our processes. We didn't cut any corners, and we may have missed something there, and we need to go back and learn from what we missed and then apply it and make sure we don't that doesn't occur as we go forward. So again, I think from the failure it's extremely unfortunate from the science mission director's standpoint, losing the spacecraft, but it also gives us a tremendous opportunity to learn, and we need to really make sure we take that learning in and really, let that drive the way we do processes and the way we move forward, and really distill out of that this terrible event something that we can use to be better and go forward. But I think it serves to us in the shuttle world now as a reminder that this business isn't easy, and when we start thinking about celebrations and other things we ought to do, they don't come easy, and they only come through all the hard work and staying focused on what we need to go do. And so that's kind of my own internal kind of reminder of what we need to do from this.
Any other questions? Okay, not seeing any. All right. We did mention, obviously, that Endeavour's rollout to Launchpad 39A is being delayed at least 24 hours. That means the NASA TV Q&A with Endeavour's crew, who were going to be here, is canceled, unfortunately, and will not be able to be provided even tomorrow if we do move to roll out tomorrow. So just want to put that on. We did have that on the TV schedule, but we do have the STS-133 astronauts still will be here. They are currently set to be here for their news conference about 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, but it could be a little earlier depending on their availability and when they're done in crew quarters. So we'll have to look at the exact start time. Please watch NASA TV and follow along, and we'll get you that information as soon as possible. In the meantime, for more information about the STS-133 mission, go online at www.nasa.gov/shuttle. Thanks for joining us.